Everyone, welcome back to Urban Pro Wrestling. And as I told you guys previously, we're going to be acquiring talent left and right. That is my goal. As we're getting closer and closer to April 2022. And we've got another big talent from Georgia. I'm really loving the Georgia pro wrestling scene, so I'm trying to get as many as I can. That's nice. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Dominic Stucky, how are you, man?
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great, like really, really great. I'm happy we scheduled this for a Monday, though. It's been a long weekend of wrestling, so
I feel it,
this is a
honestly.
nice change.
Mondays are one of my favorites, also one of my most stressful. But I feel as I love to get things done at the beginning of the week. Kind of sets up the rest of the week perfectly. So with that being said, I always ask everyone this because I've always kind of wondered. Professional wrestling, as we all know, is kind of an interesting industry to get into. It's probably one of the easiest, but also probably the hardest to be successful at. So why professional wrestling?
Why? Wow. Almost it's crazy because I've done wrestling for a little bit now. I've been wrestling for half a decade, and no one has ever asked me why, like at all. So when I was a kid, and this is gonna sound crazy, the very first like wrestling I ever saw, I'm originally from Orlando, but we would visit my grandparents over the summer. So the first match I ever saw was John Cena versus Kurt Angle, John Cena's debut match. So I actually don't remember the match because I was only like 4 at the time, but I remember the main event was Hulk Hogan versus Chris Jericho. And Jericho was just giving it to Hogan, giving it to Hogan, giving it to Hogan, all the talk. And I'm a kid, so I copy what Jericho's saying, and you can't really copy what Chris Jericho's saying without a couple repercussions. So I remember my grandfather got like super mad at me. He was like, "Yeah, you can't say things like that. You'll never be able to do things like that." And I was like, "All right, cool. Never be able to do things like that. I guarantee you, I'll be able to do everything like that." I wasn't even a wrestling fan. I just didn't like being told that I couldn't do it. So it's always stuck with me.
So kind of coming from that, training wise, since obviously I think it's kind of cool because I didn't expect that. I mean, John Cena versus Kurt Angle was a good match, but then Hogan and Jericho. I think that at that time Jericho just lost the undisputed title around that time. Yeah, so
Yep.
he was still kind of in the main event picture. So would Jericho kind of be one of your inspirations, maybe a little bit?
Oh, I love Jericho because Jericho has a unique ability in our business to constantly reinvent himself. And the issue is people get, lulled to sleep because, oh, I wrestled this match. So I'm just going to go wrestle the exact same match over here and the exact same match over there. And it gets to be kind of a funk. And the best thing about Jericho, too, which a lot of other wrestlers got to realize is you can't always be the guy. You just always have to act like the guy. There's going to be times where you're not the undisputed champion. You have to watch Hulk Hogan, a man who looks like a walrus, hold the belt up over your head. But if you let that get to you, this business is going to eat you alive.
Yeah, I've been told this business is not for the weak-hearted.
Oh, it's not.
And I've got to ask, training wise, how was that for you? Because clearly, you at that point, I'm assuming you watched it enough. And so, was it one of those things to where it was like, all right, this is, I've been told that it could be a cakewalk for some, and for others, it was a little bit more difficult. Were you like naturally grasping it, or what was the case?
Well, training for me started pretty awkwardly. So I graduated from high school in 2016. I had did amateur wrestling for 6 years before graduating, and I had saw a Facebook post, and it was, "Do you want to be a professional wrestler?" I was like, "Yep, I 100% do." So it was meet at this location, be ready to work. So it wasn't doing any wrestling. It was setting up a ring. So I got there an hour early, sat outside, waited for people. A couple people finally showed up. I'm setting up the ring. And then it turns out the company that I set the ring up for was for Luke Gallows. So this was right before he went back to WWE the second time. So they gave me a key. They're like, "You're allowed to train the Saturdays that we have shows as long as you help set up the ring." So that's what I did for about my first 4 months. So I actually learned how to bump from Gangrel, and that was the easy part. Once you learn how to bump, you kind of can do anything in wrestling. The issue is meeting all those guys at one time. I didn't have one set trainer at first. So I'm hearing a little bit of this, I hear a little bit of that, hear a little bit of this, and all that's getting in your head. And it's almost overwhelming when you're new because you're trying to do everything perfect to everybody. And if I could ever give advice to any young wrestler trying to get in, you're not going to be perfect. Just go ahead and get that out of your system, because once you realize you're not going to be perfect, you'll start performing perfectly, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. And so, having all those different trainers, and I said it could get someone's head. So how was it? I'm assuming because of all different styles. So how was it like? How were you able to kind of separate, or maybe this can work here and there? Like, were you able to, or it was kind of a bit too much at that time?
So it was a lot, but luckily it was the summer and I had just graduated. So even though I was going to go to college afterwards, I had a bunch of time to just think about wrestling. So I would learn on a Saturday and just digest. And I was lucky too, because since Luke basically gave me a key to train, the champion Zane Stevens, he's a wrestler out of Alabama. He would get there early to train with me, and he would teach me a lot. And then, when you're training with the champion, not a whole lot of people always have things to say with you. And then eventually moved on to train with my main trainer, Iceberg. He and I actually lived in the same town, and he began training me. He trained me for months, and then I would move on to training with Luke and Proper, and then I would move on to training with Underground Fighting Dojo up here in Georgia. So I've been lucky enough to have a lot of great teachers, and I've been lucky enough to have a lot of time to really digest and understand what they're saying to me.
So since you're not a spring chicken, you're not the new kid on the block. So how how necessarily in terms of development do you feel like you kind of developed a style and just sorry, did you feel like you developed a style quickly and you were able to kind of differentiate yourself in a way that it made you successful? Pretty like early going, or was it not until later on where you kind of seen that kind of come into fruition?
Oh, it took time, because honestly, when you're new, you're always comparing yourself to the other new guy. Like even if you won't admit it, you're always comparing yourself to the other new guy. So Priscilla Kelly, Austin Theory, and myself were all born around 6 months from each other. And then we all debuted in wrestling within the same year. So my original trainer was good friends with Priscilla Kelly's original trainer, who was good friends with Austin Theory's good trainer. So when they're talking about their new guys, I'm like, pulling up my collar, like, oh, I'm disappointing you. So I would go out in that first year of matches. I was just trying so hard. And you can tell when the person in the ring is thinking about it too much and they're making mistakes that you don't have to. It really didn't hit me until about almost 2 years in, where I wrestled a guy named Dax Anthony. I was basically on the chopping block on the indies because I was not a hot commodity. I didn't have people wanting to interview me like today. If I didn't wrestle Dax, I would have never figured out my style. That's actually where my nickname, the Hitmaker, started to originate, because it was like, okay, I'm going to research my opponent. I'm going to treat it just like, a game on NFL Sunday or the NBA Finals. I'm going to research. I'm going to see what they do. I'm going to scout. I'm going to scout, and I'm going to scout some more. That's when I started developing my style. It took time, and it was scary too, because in wrestling we never realize how much time we have until our time is up. So I was constantly against myself.
So in order to kind of double back over there, you talked about research, and I kind of love that aspect. I feel it's not as appreciated as it should be in today's world. Um, how much time? Like, you got to think too is that you're taking time to research your opponent, and then if you have multiple opponents over the weekend, how do you kind of allocate that time to just figure out and break down your opposition?
So I never say too much time is too much time, because I want my matches to be great. I want somebody, when they leave, they remember the Dominic Stucky match. They remember how it made them felt, how it looked, every little thing about it. Kind of like Randy Savage used to put so much into his matches. So, admittedly, I'm not a great tag team wrestler, at least not until recently. So I would watch hours upon hours upon hours of tag team wrestling. And then if I had a specific opponent, like we mentioned a couple other possible wrestlers coming down for Urban Pro, most of them that we've talked about, I've dived hours into watching their matches. I'll look them up on YouTube, Fight TV, anything that I can get my hands on to see them. And to be honest with you, I carry around a book. I write it down in a book like, oh, this is your signature move. This is what you do. You love to do kicks. Okay, this is how I can catch this kick. This is how I can duck this kick. These are things that, even though it takes a lot of time, if it's your dream, it's no time at all, really.
That was actually well crafted. Damn.
Yeah.
And to kind of move forward too, I always like to ask this. So speaking about styles, and we've kind of been focusing on training and styles a lot here. What do you feel is your style? There's gotch, there's strong, there's hardcore descent, lucha libre. There's a lot of different aspects in pro wrestling. What is kind of your style, or are you more of a hybrid?
I would say Dominic Stucky style is Dominic Stucky. And I know that's the generic professional wrestling answer, but you can watch some of my matches where I'm high flying, where I'm like cruiserweights in the 1990s. You can watch some of my matches where I have dudes up in double Samoan drops like I'm Cena. I made sure that, I put in all the work that if somebody asked me to do something, I can. I take a lot of pride in working out, keeping my body fit. And I also take a lot of pride in watching film, always learning new moves, always learning new maneuvers. Now, if I had to narrow it down to put it like in a video game scope, I would probably say it's kind of like Brett, where he'll go to the top rope every now and again. He'll go to the second rope, but he's focusing on a body part. He loves focusing on submissions, wearing somebody down, trying to get the win. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting your hand raised. So you got to find the most effective way of getting your hand raised.
So, and then my next question would be, and I love this question too. Do you always, which one is easier for you, heel or face?
So I actually didn't get a choice. There's a guy in Georgia wrestling. His name is Matt Hankins. Matt is one of the most respected wrestling minds around. And when I first started, I was going to be called Dominic Demento. Like, I was ready. I was going to get shirts made. Dominic Demento is who I was going to be because my favorite wrestler was The Undertaker, and he wrestled Damien Demento in the first main event of Monday Night Raw. So it was going to be this cool circle around. I had it all planned out, and I went out as a heel, and I come back through the curtain, and Matt Hankins goes, "Congratulations, kid. You're a face from now on." And that's how I got booked literally everywhere for about from 2016 until a couple months ago. Out of the over hundreds of matches that I've had, I probably worked about 4 heel. So in the recent weeks, I've just became heel. I got my own little group. I even announced to the world I've made friends. And luckily, I get to wrestle in all these college towns like Athens. So it's super easy to go, get under their skin. Like, I won a tag title with Urban West at SVW in Athens. And the first thing I said was I finally brought a champ back to Georgia. I mean, I did it before the Braves. So
Oh
both are
no.
both are pretty easy. It's just a matter of where you're at. Match wise though, heel is the way to go because you don't have to bump as much.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that question. I always get something different, so I've always appreciated that question. Um, and then I also want to talk about a little bit more about inspiration because we've mentioned Bret Hart, we've mentioned Chris Jericho, we've mentioned Hulk Hogan, a lot of different styles there. And I gotta ask, when you're shaping up, your arsenal, I think it's you've got to have some type of inspiration. And obviously, I think for you, more Chris Jericho on the microphone, if anything, right?
Yeah. Jericho, Punk, and then actually doubling back to Cena. Cena gets a lot of respect for his microphone, his mic work now. He gets a lot of respect for his in-ring work now. And honestly, whenever I plan out matches, I plan it out through like his scope because you remember he would go to the top rope. He would do everything that it took, even though he was wearing jorts to try and get the win. And if you watch a lot of his best matches, he has a certain intensity about him where he's playing the game, but he's also playing the crowd at the same time. If you look at Cena, Cena is not necessarily like any other giant face that the business has seen. He's not constantly, putting his hands to his ear or saying cool catchphrases. He just has the "you can't see me," but he's grasping the crowd. So whenever I build up my matches, how do I get the crowd invested? Are they going to be in love with this? Am I doing this move for me in my highlight reel? Or am I doing it for the 10-year-old in the crowd so they want to come back and see me next month? That's really what I look at. And then if you can get the crowd around you, when people see you on YouTube or whatever they're watching you on, they're going to see the investment right there because they've tuned into TV all the time and watch wrestling. If you can get the people right next to you, you can get hundreds of people in the state, thousands of people in the country, millions of people across the world. So honestly, it's a little bit of Cena right there.
It's funny that you mentioned Johnson. So far, I have heard CM Punk. This is the same time I've heard CM Punk. Chris Jericho's the first, and John Cena's the first. I feel Johnson is really underappreciated. I think one of his best works he just did with what's his name? The Universal Champion over there.
Roman.
There you go. I don't watch the product. And it was for SummerSlam, and I remember clicking on the promo, and he basically told you how he was going to lose, and then try to redirect it as like a 1-2-3 thing how I was going to win it. But he literally gave you how I was. I thought it was so masterfully crafted. I loved Johnson as a kid, and I loved his work in the ring. So really cool to hear someone as a John Cena fan.
Well, my big thing with Cena too is, especially nowadays, and I know I said it was all about win earlier. Cena's not afraid to lose as long as it's going to put on a great match. And I think that's something that we all have to put in perspective because a lot of times guys get in their egos. And I always tell people, you're not on the indies to be a millionaire. So you can dial back on things a little bit. You can dial back on, oh, well, I can't do this if it doesn't fit my character. I can't do that. It doesn't fit who I am. If it fits and helps the show, I guarantee you it's going to help you in the long run. Like completely. You might have to give up a little bit here to get something more down the road, but it's much more substantial and it's actually a lot better to see how, oh, I dialed back here and now I can go all out down there. And that's one thing I like about Cena too. You'll see that a lot of times he's willing to take a lot of punishment from guys, not just, like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, current guys, but when the big indie movement was taking over WWE, like CM Punk and Bryan. And even before that, he would give a lot to Edge and Orton. And even before that, he was giving it to Angle, Undertaker, Lesnar. It just, for almost 20 years, he's shown that you can give yourself and still get over. And that's one of the things that I hold with me, like extremely close to my heart and mind when I'm trying to, be the best professional wrestler that I can be.
And speaking about being the best professional wrestler, so what match was it that you kind of realized, all right, I've got everything together. I was here, and now we took it up here. Like, what do you remember? What type of match that? Like, what opponent? What match that was?
Well, it was actually kind of a series of matches. I alluded to it earlier with the Dax Anthony match. So I wrestled 3 matches at WrestleMania, which was basically my home promotion. A lot of people actually know me as being Mr. WrestleMania. So the first match I wrestled this guy, he was in his 70s. His name was Chick Donovan. And Chick, he did just as much as any 70-year-old could do. So I wrestled Chick, and the match is awful. And I'm thinking, you know what? I've been in the business for 2 years. I think it might be time for, me to get out because I can't do this. Like, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I'm never going to be as good as I hope. Then the next show, I wrestled Dax Anthony, and people are like, well, you might have something to you. So then Dax asked for another rematch with me. And we ended up going 20 minutes, which in Georgia indie wrestling, a 19-year-old getting 20 minutes of showtime without, anybody over their shoulder, barking and giving orders, that's almost unheard of especially for a guy like me who at the time I was like 160 pounds, maybe didn't have actual gear. I wrestled in camo pants that my mom had bought me. But after that second Dax match, you could hear the crowd. You could hear that the crowd had gotten invested in it. I could hear guys in the back talking about it. And I tell people too, and this is something that my trainer told me, Iceberg told me, you're not doing something right unless somebody hates it. And I know that kind of sounds backwards, but if you come back and everybody's patting you on the back, especially as a business as competitive as wrestling, if everybody's patting you on the back, that means you did bad. You want somebody to be like, oh man, how am I going to top that? Being kind of nervous, trying to pick apart what you did, because that means they were glued to that ring for however long you were wrestling. Is those critiques, is that little bit of hating that lets you know, hey, I'm good. And that was the match. That happened in April of 2018, and since then it's been a lot of ups. I've been lucky enough to not suffer a whole lot of downs in this business.
And to kind of go off that, and I like this one too. The journey that you've had, and I remember when you sent me your resume, I was like, this guy just feels like champion everywhere. I was like, Jesus. When did you win your first championship?
So, I won my first championship pretty early on. So I started in 2016. When January 2017 rolled around, I feuded with a wrestler named Iceman. He was from Alabama. He was coming to a little town about an hour and a half away from me called Whitesburg. It's right outside of Noonan. And after about 3 months of feuding with Iceman, he beat me the first time. I beat him in the tag match. And then we had a hardcore match for the championship. And it was rough because obviously there's no training for hardcore. But in about, I think it was exactly March 24th of 2017, I won my first championship. So I wasn't even 6 months in, really. And championships are cool, but championships are also a curse because no one tells you how heavy they actually are. So I didn't have a legitimate bag. I had like a regular like school book bag, and I put it in the bag so much that I like started ripping the straps off the bag. I was like, man, book bags aren't cheap. So I'm having to carry this big wrestling belt on my shoulder. I was like, man, I feel like such an idiot because even though I love wrestling, I look like a jerk because I'm the guy carrying my belt everywhere with me.
At that point, you're getting it seen though, so that's a good thing.
It was good getting it seen, but it's super hard to explain people because this was my second semester of college too. So it's super hard to explain to your roommate, hey, where are you going, every night? And then why aren't you coming back in until 1 a.m.? And you're living life like Batman, really. And then next thing you know, you come back in with this giant gold belt, and people are like, well, can I touch it? Can I take pictures with it? Can I do this? Can I do this? And you're like, yeah, just don't break it because can't afford to replace it. Any promoter can tell you that belts aren't cheap at all.
No, they are not. They are a pretty penny. So it's funny, guys, because this man literally has like 15 titles at least to his name. Well, he had sent me a resume, and I was like, "Holy, was it? Whoa, okay." I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I was like, "Wait a minute, this is a lot more than I thought." And they weren't short reigns either, which was, I think, what's really impressive. They are, for me, what look like all very long reigns. I think one that was over a year as well.
Yes, I've had a reign that was over 450 days.
Can you go in a little bit more into detail about that one?
So it started off rough. So I got to the point at one point where wrestling was all I did. I woke up, you go wrestle a show, then you drive somewhere else, you go wrestle that afternoon. So I wrestled one match in the morning. I drove 3 hours to go to a company called Pose. I love Pose. Rick is a great guy. I get to Pose and they're like, all right, it's a tournament for the championship. So I'm like, cool. I love it. I love tournaments. That's the amateur wrestler in me. And they're like, yeah, you're going to the finals and each match is going to be 15 minutes at least. So I was like, wait a second, 15 plus 15 plus 15, that's 45 minutes of ring work, and this isn't even my first show of the day. So I work all the way through it. I got to work guys like Johnny Romano and Logan Stevens and Dante Steele. I always try and name drop too because, I love to hear other people's names, honestly. And once I won it, Rick, he comes up to me and is like, "You're the guy." Even though it wasn't the heavyweight title, he was like, "This is the workhorse. This is the Intercontinental belt. You're the guy. You're going to be wrestling, long, drawn out matches after long, drawn out storylines. And you're not going to be a 10-minute dude. You're going to have to drop 20 every single night. Sometimes in hardcore scenarios, sometimes in technical wrestling scenarios. So I was lucky enough to be able to wrestle great wrestlers like J2 Strong and Hunter Young in my reign. And then near the end, it was discussed. It was like, all right, Dom, you can't be junior heavyweight anymore. You're going to be the guy, and the only way to be the guy is sometimes you have to lose a little bit. So when I finally dropped it, it was a relief because you get to see all the work that you put in the belt help elevate somebody else. Because every great professional wrestler will tell you, it's not the title that makes the man, it's the man that makes the title. We were talking about Big Gold earlier. The reason why I love Big Gold is because when I was a kid, Edge, Undertaker, Triple H, they did everything they could, WrestleMania after WrestleMania, to gain the gold. And even before that, Sting, Hogan, Flair, Dusty, Harley, going way back to Frank Gotch. Everyone did what they could to win the belt and make the belt something important, because if you're not doing things for the championships, you shouldn't have the championship. Because if you're just going to put it over your shoulder and, do photo ops, it's nothing but leather and metal, and leather and metal doesn't get anybody excited.
That is very, very true. And to kind of move forward too, you guys have like a million names for y'all's finishers. So when I say things, everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. So I'm just gonna leave this one up to you. If you could just kind of break it down for the good folks at home, because you may have a different name for it. So go right ahead.
So honestly, most of my moves are Dom related. So I have the Dom Bomb. I have the Domino Effect, which actually I did not come up with that. Someone else gave me the Domino Effect. It was a fan poll, and they're like, add that in there, and it ended up winning. I have the Dom X Machina, and then with my submissions, I have one called HFIL because I'm a big Dragon Ball Z fan. So is the home for infinite losers because you're stuck in there. So I have a lot of names for a lot of my moves, and actually I pride myself on trying to learn other wrestlers' moves names, not just the move itself, but what do they call it. That way, when I'm talking to them, like, hey, you remember when you did, the super spider suplex or something like that?
You know, and I got two more in me because I don't think I can think of any more. So I always like to ask, what are your goals in professional wrestling? Obviously, not as a new kid on the block. That may be a little bit more extensive than others. So definitely want to know.
So I was lucky enough to participate in a TNA tryout. I've had matches where I've been able to wrestle for NWA and the Impact brand. I want to be able to make it to WWE. Getting signed is ultimately the goal. Now, as for right now in the Indies, I love traveling. I love going places, but I also love elevating people and having great matches. I wanted to be able to go to Tuscaloosa on one weekend and then turn around and be in Chattanooga the next weekend and then be in Columbia, South Carolina before heading to Florida and being able to steal the show everywhere. In fact, the weekend that you messaged me, I went from Atlanta, Georgia on a Friday night to Gadsden, Alabama on a Saturday to Knoxville, Tennessee that Sunday morning, and then drove 9 hours to Orlando. And everybody thinks, oh, that's so much driving, especially you're doing that driving for yourself. But a lot of my goal is just a part of the journey. Like, who am I helping? How am I doing this? Because you never know who you might inspire. You might inspire another wrestler to do something. You might inspire a kid to be a part of it. And at that point, it's just that's what makes all this worth it, because your back's gonna hurt, your arm's gonna hurt, your leg's gonna hurt. But seeing what you can do for other people, that's the big one.
And my last one, what are your goals in urban pro wrestling?
Well, for one, first and foremost, to be the champ. I'm not going to cut a promo on you because you've been so nice to me, but if you're in any company and you don't want to be the champ, then you need to go ahead and get out. Even more specifically, Urban Pro is in my hometown of Orlando, Florida. So for me, this is a homecoming to be able to wrestle in front of my friends and my family and show them exactly what Dominic Stucky is capable of. And for anybody that hasn't seen me yet, for any non-believers, I'm ready to convert them. I'm ready to bring them on my side, sell them a couple shirts, maybe in a few wristbands, and steal the show right out of the hands of anybody that's wrestling next to me. And that's not trying to be disrespectful to any other wrestler on the roster. But when you have Dominic Stucky on your roster, he is the roster. So.
Period. I don't think there's anything I could really say to that. So, with that being said, sir, do you have any social media you want to plug?
Well, almost all my social media is under They Call Me Dom. So if you just keep searching out They Call Me Dom, you'll see this pretty face. And just follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, however you can reach out. And then to other wrestlers too, if you ever want to reach out to me, see what we can get, what business we can get going, because I love helping people get into Georgia or get into Alabama, get into Tennessee, wherever I can help people get into, let me know. That way, when you come down to Urban Pro and I kick your butt, you can't be too mad.
And folks, with that, our social media, you guys are going to be watching this on YouTube. That's what you guys are watching this on. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, Urban Pro Wrestling. So follow us on Instagram at Urban Pro Wrestling. Same thing with our Facebook page. On Twitter, Urban PW. Follow it. With that, we have a website coming up, merchandise like this. I know I've said this for a while. It is going to be up because I am like driving my website developer and my artist nuts. So it is going to be up by the middle of December is my goal, if not the first week of January for sure, because it's driving me nuts. I don't have it. And with that, thank you guys for watching this. Have a great one. We will see you next time.